Kimberley, British Columbia, and the Sullivan Mine Tour. In 1892, the large ore deposits were discovered in this area, and by 1909 was acquired by the Canadian Pacific Railway. And by 1916, zinc, lead, and iron sulfates were being pulled from the mine. Teck later took over the mine, and after 92 years of active production, the Sullivan mine was closed in 2001. Why don't you join me on a full tour of the Sullivan Mine, including a full tour of the power plant? What makes this tour even more amazing is that it is given by a former employee who worked here for many years, and includes a full demonstration of several pieces of large-scale equipment that was used during that time.
You may now exit. Coming up on your right are three buildings: the North Star Schoolhouse, a replica of Kimberley's Railfanning Theater, and a replica miner's residence. The schoolhouse is from the early 1900s, providing education to up to 16 students at a time. It was located by the North Star Mine, where Kimberley Ski Hill is now. Containing about 10 tons of iron pyrite. The yellow locomotive is actually what's underneath the locomotive of the train is now riding. The superstructure is built specifically for the train by our team of volunteers.
It's a little hard to hear, but the locomotive that is pulling this train is actually one of the original mine locomotives that they've converted with a cab and proper controls.
There's more along the tour. For those of you who have cameras, you are welcome to take photos at any time throughout the tour, but please remember to keep your arms inside the car while the train is moving. operation for over 40 years. Our core group of dedicated, hard-working volunteers build and maintain it for us. The brick building on your left is the train shop where they maintain our rolling stock.
My name is Gordon Olson, and I'll try and enlighten you a bit on how this place operated when it was a good place to work. I put in 37 years here, only had 25 years underground. I had to go outside the last 12 years. But believe me, I'd have far sooner been underground those last 12 years than outside. My dad and brother both worked here too. We had well over 100 and some years between the three of us, and we all three got a pension check at the same time for a little while. I don't know how many uncles that worked here, quite a few, and some cousins and stuff, and nephews. And my wife's dad worked here, and her grandfather and some of her relatives, so we had quite a connection to the place. Does anybody here have any underground mining experience? No? That's good, that helps me a lot. Anyway, this mine was found in 1889 by 4 prospectors from the United States. They were crawling around up on the surface at the 4,800 foot level, and they found an outcropping of ore on the surface that looked quite good. So they staked claims all around the area, went back down to the States. At that same time, there was a small company operating a small mine right across the valley from where they staked the claims, up where the ski hill is now. They heard about the guy staking the claims across from them, so they went over and had a look around and thought things looked quite good as well. So they went down to the States and they hunted the 4 guys up, made a deal to buy all the claims off them. They paid them $6,000 a piece, total $24,000. All in all, it produced, does anybody want to take a shot at how many dollars worth more produced out of here? No? It produced in the neighborhood of about $60 billion worth of ore, so that was a pretty good investment.
Yeah, I guess.
It started up production in 1898 and the doors closed on the place December 2001. So it ran for 103 years. In that time it employed 60,000 employees and there was only 73 fatalities in that 103 years, so that was a really good record. My wife never ever liked me working underground. She figured that someday I wasn't going to come home. I couldn't convince her it was the safest place in the world. I took all her daughters on a tour and her sister and brother-in-law and her nieces and nephews, and I don't know who all, quite a few people, but my wife would never go, she wouldn't even go near the portal in the night. But she's been in this one here about 5 or 6 times, so this mine's got to be the safest place in the world. When I had to go outside, she was the only one that was happy I wasn't. In the 1940s, it employed 2,000 employees underground, and they started producing between 10 and 12,000 ton of ore a day. And it kept that same production up every day that it operated, right up until the last year that it ran. For a few months from that 2001, it still produced that 10 to 12,000 ton a day, only with 250 employees underground. So we got to be pretty sure those 250 employees were a lot harder workers than the 2,000 were, don't you think? And for a period of around 10 years in the 1950s, it was considered the largest producer of lead, zinc, and silver in the world. Okay, what I'm standing in here is what they call a slusher sub. These slusher subs is where all the ore was produced out of. The ore would come out of these things here called draw holes. There's one there and another one back here. And there would be around 70 or 80 of these slusher subs operating throughout the mine at any time to get that 10 to 12,000 ton a day out. The slusher subs were a lot smaller than what we're standing in here. They would only be about 7 feet high and 7 feet wide. But they could be anywhere from 150 to 400 feet in length. You would start driving it, and there would be 4 of these slusher subs from one level to the next. And whatever length these slushers were, or these subs were, that was referred to as a block from one level to the next level. So you would start driving these slusher subs from a fresh air place somewhere. Fresh air here is where you got off those coaches. You had to drive it till you hit an exhaust circuit. Now the exhaust circuit in here is at the top of that ladder back there where the daylight's coming in. So once you established your exhaust circuit, then you could start driving these draw holes. They were driven every 25 feet apart, down both sides of the sub. And all this development work too was done in the waste rock. The ore body would be 40 feet above here. So you had to start those draw holes out that size there. You clean that muck out of there, get in there with the machine and drill and blast another round. When you drilled that round off, you had to drill it as steep as you could, and as wide as you could, and as high as possible. You'd blast that round, clean the muck out of there again, and then this next round was a pretty tough one to drill. You actually had to get in there with the machine and lay down to do it. Now, if I got in one of those holes with the machine, I don't know if I could do any work with it. If I did get down, now I got no idea how I'd get back on my feet again.
I understand that.
So when you drilled that next round off, when you blasted that, it would have to be 8 feet high, 8 feet wide, and steepened up to 45 degrees on the bottom. So those draw holes would be driven up for 40 feet up to the ore body. And then you would drive what they called a drill sub. It was driven parallel to the slusher sub, only 8 feet high and 8 feet wide. The same thing under the draw holes on that side, there'd be another drill sub driven as well. And if these slusher subs were 300 feet long, that's how long the drill subs would be. Their first hole would maybe be about there, it might only be 25, 30 feet long. Then you'd go up here, it would be quite a bit longer. And the steeper you went, the longer those holes would get. Right up to the vertical position, they could maybe be 300 to 400 feet in length. From the drill sub that side, they would drill back that way first, and then they would fan back to the 90 degrees coming back this way. If that was a diamond drill, it didn't have a very big bit on it, so the holes wouldn't take a lot of powder. So they drill a ring of holes here, and then every 5 feet all the way down that sub, they drill another ring of holes. If it was a percussion drill, it had quite a bit bigger bit, so the holes could take more powder. So instead of drilling the rings every 5 feet apart, they would drill them every 7 feet apart, all the way down that drill site. So to do all that development work and all that drilling in one of these blocks, it might take anywhere from a year to 2 years to do it all. So once a block was all drilled off, then they had what they call blast hole loaders. Would come in and load all those holes up with powder. And that would take quite a few months sometimes, maybe up to at least 6 months or more to load one block. Well, once a block was loaded, it would blast it down on a Saturday with nobody else within the mine. By the time the next shift came on, the mine would be aired out really good. And so then they had what they call slusher miners. They would come in and scrape more out of these draw holes. The slusher miners were the guys that had done the development work, and they were getting up in years a bit. And this slushing was supposedly an easier job for them. The ore would gravity feed out of those draw holes, and you would scrape it into what we call the mill hole. That would be a hole that would be between that scraper and that hoist there that went into a raise that went down to the next level. And there was a chute on the next level that a transportation crew would come in with a train of empty cars, load that train up with the ore out of that chute, take it down the trackways and dump it into a great big huge ore pass. They're unbelievable, those ore passes the size of them. And there was all kinds of colder ore from other parts of the mine going down that ore pass as well. That led to one of the 3 crushing chambers in the mine, where it'd be crushed up and then eventually make its way to the concentrator. But about 1970, one of the blocks they blasted down had quite a high concentration of iron and sulfur in it. And when the slusher miners started scraping the ore out of the draw holes, that allowed the air and the oxygen to get up into that broken muck. And it started a reaction with that iron and sulfur. And after a while, the ore started getting kind of warm coming out of the draw holes. Then it actually got so hot that it ran like molten lava, red hot out of the draw holes. So they had to get protective gear for the slusher miners to wear to go into that sub to do any work of any sort. They had a company built a fireproof coverall for them, and they had to wear good leather gloves and boots, and they had to put on a Scott Air Pack. That was a full-face piece with oxygen bottle on their back to go into that sub to do any work of any sort. And you couldn't put water on that hot muck to cool it down, or that would create an SO2 gas. And if you happen to take one breath of that SO2 gas, that would be the last breath you would take. So they had to scrape it dry into that mill hole. So it was horrible, dusty stuff to move. And the same thing, the transportation crew, when they went to pull that chute, you'd have to dress up in all the protective gear that the slusher miners did. And they had to pull that chute dry as well. But then when they dumped that ore into that big ore pass, it was slowly mixed with all the other cold ore going down that ore pass, and it got cooled down that way. So by the time it got to the crushing chambers, it was quite cool, and there was no SO2 gas in it because the water hadn't been poured to it. And it took about 10 years to scrape that hot muck out of here. Some of the guys that worked in it didn't do so good, but they're still not going around telling them the pension check. I was always a little disappointed I was never asked to go work in it because I wanted to have the opportunity to tell them what to do with that job, and I never got to use it up. So we've just got a small scraper set up in here and a small hoist to move it with for demonstration purpose. But I don't have one of those mill holes to scrape anything into. So even at my age, I don't mind pretending I do things. I'll run that back and forth empty, and I'll pretend I'm scraping some muck out of these draw holes, and people can use your imagination and pretend along with me. if everything went like that, you had a pretty easy shift, but if you scraped as much as I just did, you didn't contribute too much that time. But I didn't know guys that would run that scraper back and forth empty like that all shift, just to keep the motor on the hoist for him in case the shift boss put his hand on it when he came around. I didn't tell him how hard he was working. I'll get you people to come back this way. Okay, what we have on this wall here, that's a round that's all drilled off, it's all loaded up and ready to be blasted. So when you come on shift, there'd be a muck pile here from the previous shift blasting. So you'd scrape that out, then you'd set up one of these things called a jackplane or a widowmaker and drill on that next round. It would take one man probably close to around 2 hours to drill that many holes 6 feet deep in the regular waste rock we have here. And it would take about maybe 15 to 20 bits to do that with. But we had a rock in here called Black Chert. It's the hardest rock in the world next to Alaska Black Diamond. And if you hit that chert, you and your partner would both have to set up a machine and drill on the next round. And you'd maybe drill for close to 3 hours and only get those holes drilled 4 feet deep. And you would use in the neighborhood of at least 200 bits or more to do that with. If you only got it drilled 4 feet deep, you had to blast it at the end of the chute. So once you had your round drilled off, you'd put your blasting caps in the holes. And your blasting caps are all numbered from number 1 and up. And the difference between two numbers just gives you a millisecond of a delay time from one hole would go off till the next one would go. So the very first hole you would blast in there would be this one right here. So you'd put a number 1 cap in that hole. This would be your second hole. That would take a number 2 cap. Then a number 3 cap here and a number 4 cap there. That part of your round right there is the most important part there is. That's called the burner to cut, and if that didn't break out right, the rest of your round wouldn't break properly. Then you could start working your way to the outside. Every row of holes you put in a higher number of caps, working your way over to the outside here, right over to these 2 holes. Same thing here, these 3 holes, and then these 2 holes would get higher number of caps. The second to last holes you'd blast would be these ones right here called back holes. You could put the same number of caps in that hole as this one, higher number up here, same number over here, and then a higher number in that middle by itself. The last holes you would blast would be these 5 across the bottom here called lifters. You'd put your highest number cap in those lifters and the same number cap in every one of those 5 holes. So that all 5 of those would go off at exactly the same time. And they would actually take that muck pile and throw it back a little ways. So your cross shift would pretty well be able to walk right in there and hang up a block and cable to finish scraping that round out. So once you had all the caps in the holes, we blasted with what they called MCN here. It was made on the property here. It was a mixture of fertilizer, nitrogen, frills, diesel, fuel, and I can't give you the rest of the recipe because this lady over here looks like she's quite interested. And I don't think I know it myself. It was bagged in 50-pound bags, and it would take a bag and a half to blast this round. We had a hopper about this square, so deep it holds a bag of that powder. You'd hook up your air hose to that, dump a bag of powder in it. Then it had a long plastic hose that would fit in those holes. You'd put that hose to the bottom of a hole, pull it back a few inches. Then it had a shorter hose with a handle. So when you squeeze that handle, that would blow that MCN into the hole and pulverize it and compact it so it wouldn't fall out of the hole. You slowly retracted the hose of the hole as it was filling up. So once you got all your holes loaded, you'd make sure you put all your tools away in a good safe place. And then you would tie these leg wires of your blasting caps together with this stuff called beeline. It took a detonation to set these off. And this beeline is a detonating cord that would do that. But in order to set that beeline off, it took a detonation to do that as well. So you put a blasting cap on it like this. That's an electric blasting cap. So in order to set that off, we all carried one of these things here, called a mini blaster. It looked like this. So at 2 o'clock on day shift was our quitting time. That's when you'd be ready to blast that round. So when you push the switch this way, the light would come on here. When that light come on, you'd push it the other way. And that would go about like this. About that quick, that would be blasted. Well, like I said, that'd be quitting time, so you head for the daylight, get outside and clean up and head for home. But quite often you sucked in a bit of dust on this kind of work too. So downtown they had some places, had some excellent dust that we could have on the way home. Are there any questions on this blasting? Okay, I'll start this jackleg up in a minute and I'll run it. Like I said, it's really noisy, so if everybody want to plug their ears really good. I was telling the people about that hot muck being red hot. Here's a picture of it here. This is what it looks like. About the mid-80s, I was working with this fellow. He just started putting this book together. And he interviewed 20 some of the most honest storytellers who've ever worked in mine here. So apparently every story in here is going to be true. I think it took him well over 20 years to put it together. It's for sale down at the station. So that video, some other young guy made it like that too. But I'm not here to sell books or videos. I'll tell you about this room we're in here right now. This room is called the refuge station. Up until 1972, we never had nothing like this to eat our lunches in, or come to if there was some kind of disaster in the mine. And the worst disaster that could happen with these is the fire broke out. So the way they had to notify us if anything happened, down in the powerhouse where the compressed air is all generated, they would put a gas in the airline called methyl mercaptan. That smells just like leaky natural gas or propane. Only when that came through your airline, it was a lot stronger. So if you smelled that coming through your airline, you'd hurriedly shut down and go to the nearest fresh air place you could think of and stay there until somebody would come along and tell you it's okay to leave. Well, in 1970, some company come out with this thing here. It's called a self-rescuer. And what this thing would do, it would convert carbon monoxide to carbon dioxide if there was a fire in the mine. And you could last for 45 minutes with this thing long enough to save your life. You'd take the cover off, plug this into your mouth, close your nose up with these clips, and head for fresh air. But they're quite heavy and quite bulky. And these things too, when you started using them, it didn't take very long until they would get so hot they'd start burning your lips. But you're way better off to burn your lips and try and go ruins down the road than to discard the thing. But they're quite heavy and quite bulky, and the place to carry them was on our belts. Well, we had a big wet cell battery to carry, plus a couple of wrenches on our belts and a few other things. And being bulky like that, you knew very well if you slipped and fell, you're going to land on that thing and get hurt. So being the good, safe workers we all were, we never liked to take a chance of getting hurt. So we told the company what they could do with those things. They didn't like what we told them. And they came back at us, and we didn't like what they told us. They told us if we were caught in a working place without one, our paycheck would be waiting for us when we got downtown. So we reluctantly carried them, because we kind of laid our jobs. And it did happen to a number of guys. They did fall in that thing and maybe cracked a few ribs or something, but at least they were still breathing. And they got them in the mines in the States at the same time we got them here. But all they did there, they just put them in racks on the different levels by the skip where the guys would get on and off the skips. So if something happened, they were supposed to make it from their working place to that station and grab one of these things to try and save their life. Well, in May of 1972 in a mine down in the States, there was 63 miners went underground one morning, and a big fire broke out partway through the shift, and none of them came out. So 2 mine rescue teams went from the mine here, and a couple from the coal mines and some other places in the mines in the States went to see if they could go and help rescue anybody. But when they went into that mine looking for survivors, all they could do was help pack out some of the bodies that they came across. And all the ones they came across either hadn't made it to that station to get one of those, or if they did get it, when they started using it and it started burning their lips, they discarded it. And that's where they were found laying right beside the thing they discarded. But a week to 10 days after, they did find 2 survivors way back in an isolated part of that mine in fresh air. So out of 63 miners, there was 61 lives that were lost that day. And we didn't have these refuge stations in that mine, and we didn't have them in here at that time. So after that, there was one of these put on every level throughout the whole mine here. And there was only one way into them and one way out. There was 2 steel doors on the entranceway that were about 6 feet apart. And there was air and water that were piped into them. But in case the air line got broke, there was spare oxygen bottles like this that were kept in all of them. And you could crack open and delay things a bit that way if you needed to. And there was 2 pails of a clay mixture along with a couple bottles of water kept in all of them. So then if you smelt that methyl mercaptan coming through your airline, you'd hurriedly shut down and come to one of these refuge stations. And once everybody in that area was in there, you would mix up that clay and water together to make a paste with it, and use that to seal up the 2 doors with to make them airtight. I come on shift one time, and there was sitting around 10 of us. We were just putting our buckets down in the refuge station when we got a phone call that there was a fire somewhere. We didn't know exactly where it was or how big it was. We sealed up the 2 doors and stayed there. So we did. We mixed up that clay and water and sealed up the 2 doors. When we sealed up that second door, what a horrible feeling that was. We had no idea how long we'd be there. And we were in there for well over a half the shift. When we got a phone call, said it was okay to break the seal and go back to work. Well, we couldn't figure that one out, how we could go back to work. We spent the rest of the shift trying to figure out how we could go back to work because we hadn't started working yet. But that did happen in another case after I was working outside, but I don't really know any details more than that. The biggest enemy here at the hard rock mine was low oxygen or carbon monoxide. And you only really had to worry about that if you were going into a place where nobody had been in for a long time. So when I first started here, for quite a few years, we had to make sure we always had matches in a lighter that held white gas with us. So if you were sent to go into a place the air might not be so good, you'd light either your lighter or your matches and walk in with them burning. And if they went out, you'd get out of that place and ventilate it there. And coal mines, it was a little different story there. Their biggest enemy was methane gas. You can't see that or smell it, but it's highly explosive. So at one time the miner would take a little canary in with a good singing voice, and he'd hang him up close to where he was drilling. And if he drilled into methane, that little guy could detect methane quicker than the miner could. He'd quit singing right away. And the miner would get him out in fresh air and ventilate that place better. So I'm not sure exactly what year it was somebody came up with this thing hanging in front of me here. That's called the Wolf Safety Lamp. So after those came out, if you were sent to go into a place the air might not be so good, you'd get one of those lamps. You'd light a half-inch flame in there, walk in with it about that level there. If that flame started flickering or it suddenly went out, you'd get out of there and ventilate that place. The coal mine, it worked a little bit different. You still did a half-inch flame in there, hang it up close to where you'd be drilling, And if you drill into methane, that would let some methane in there to increase the size of the flame and turn it blue color. But it wouldn't let the flame out and cause an explosion, so it was quite an invention, really. Is there any questions on any of this? So what we have going right here on this case here, that would be the start of another drift. A drift is what we're standing in right here, which came in on those coaches. So we did come on shift, there'd be a big muck pile here from the previous shift blasting. So you take a water hose and soak that muck pile down really good. Then you'd wash all the dust off the walls in the back for a ways. And then take this thing called the scaling bar. And you go around and you check your back in places like this. So long as it sounded like that, it was good. But if it had a hollow sound to it, you could turn that bar around and pry those loose pieces down. It was always a real good idea to take the small ones down, because they're the ones that would hurt you. The big ones, you wouldn't feel them. And then your partner would be around the corner here with a train of about 10 empty cars hooked up to a locomotive along with this mucking machine on the end of it. So you give your partner a light like this to come in. He'd come in with that train and you would unhook one of the empty cars along with this mucking machine and then give him a light to back up a bit. Hook up the air hose to that, get on there and start cleaning that muck pile up. Once the car was full, you'd give your partner another light to come in again, and he'd come in with that train again and hook up to the full car muck, and you would unhook it from the mucking machine right here and give him a light to back up. And he'd go back far enough, there'd be a switch back here that you'd go and throw so he could put that full car muck down that other drift and come back and give you another empty car. It would probably take you close to about 2 hours to muck this out. And then you would have to set up 2 of those jack legs in here to drill in the next round, because this would take a lot more drilling than out there. You'd have to drill this off so when you blasted it, it would come out to the size we're standing in here now. And again, you'd have to have that ready for blasting at quitting time. That was called a cycle too, when you come on shift and there was a muck pile and you got rid of it, set up and drill off and blast. And if you didn't make that cycle at every shift, we worked on an hourly rate plus a bonus system. And if you didn't make that cycle, it wouldn't just affect your bonus, but it would affect your cross-shift bonus as well. And come payday, it would affect your cook's ability to cook the good meals you've been planning on cooking for the next 2 weeks. So we had 2 good reasons to make that blast, and does anybody know who we were more afraid of? So I'll start this mucking machine up. I'll just take a couple of buckets with it. It's really noisy too, so can you plug your little girl's ears? Machine is probably quite a few years older than what I am, but I'm quite sure that it's in better shape than I am because it's got better maintenance done on it. Any questions on any of this?
years, it generated over $19 billion in revenue, which would be between $60 to $80 billion today. On December 21st, 2001, after over 100 years of operation, the mine closed its doors indefinitely. Friendly reminder as we enter the tunnel, please keep your hands and arms inside the coaches.
big compressors in here. And all the locomotives that were used underground all ran on direct current. So there was two generators in here that produced the 550 volts for direct current for the locomotives. Other than that, it was mainly for compressed air. The four guys that initially laid claim to the place are these four guys right here. This guy by the name of Smith, Cleaver, Pat Sullivan, and Walter Burchett. Nobody knows what happened to these two guys after they sold their shares, but Pat Sullivan was killed in a mine in the States about a year later, and I don't really know the details of what happened to him. And I guess that's why they named this the Sullivan Mine after him. So this Walter Burchett, he came back in the early 40s. There's a picture of him up there. He was 70-some years old then. And he's got quite a look on his face because he was probably laughing all the way to the bank when he had his check. Boy, we got those guys. And when he come back here then, the mine had been running for well over 40 years. He was probably having second thoughts of got the short end of things. But I imagine the management took him out for supper anyway. Probably left him with the bill. So if we could all come back this way. Okay, over on this wall here, that's a 5-yard scoop tram loading a 25-ton truck underground. And that's what took the place of those slusher subs in later years. And that thing cost about $250,000, and a hoist for one of those slusher subs was only around $50,000, $60,000. And they would run for years and years with no maintenance. Those scoop trams had to have lots of maintenance done on them. I can't remember how many scoop trams there were, but they probably burnt up more diesel fuel in one day than it cost for electricity to run the mine for a month or more. And they got the same production, but that was called modernization. The right-hand picture there, that shows about a half a dozen miners or so with nice shovels in their hands. They're loading those cars by hand. They didn't take any electricity or diesel fuel for those guys to load them cars. There's some air compressors here. There's one laying down on this side here under the black tank, and one on the far side. This thing was built in 1880, and it was first installed in a mine sold in Farmers by Moody Lakes. And it ran by water power there. When that mine shut down in 1905, this outfit bought it and installed it here, and it ran by water power in here as well, right up until I believe it was just prior to the 1980s sometime. Because of that mechanized equipment, they didn't use much compressed air in later years. The water would come in here and hit these paddles on this side, and there's another wheel like that under the cover here. And the drive belts on this thing, they just broke about 6 years ago. And as near as they could figure out, the drive belts that were on here, they were made out of a 2,600-foot endless piece of hemp rope. And they've been on here ever since this thing was new. So they were on there for well over 100 years before they broke. Now this is a synthetic rope that's on there now. It's hard to say how long it'll last. But it's hooked up to a small electric motor right now. So we'll just run it for a little bit so you can see how nice and smooth it still runs. So seeing as you came up here from Boise, if you mind pushing my three buttons, please.
Sure.
One of these strands of rope comes around. Every time it comes around, it moves over another groove on that pulley. It gets to the far side and falls off. Somehow or other, it gets back to the other side. Goes over again. That's how we turn it off and off. So everyone goes and turns off and the whole rail comes off. That's really hard. Thanks for doing that for me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Because I don't dare touch those buttons in case something goes haywire.
Thank you.
You're probably more used to being in trouble than me.
Yeah, probably. I'm not telling.
I was saying all the locomotives that were used underground were in direct current. This is one of the generators here produced some of the direct current. It was driven by this AC motor here. And over there, the smaller one was DC generator. This one was DC motor on the far end. And both of these were built in 1905. And they were working just fine up until 1994 when the last lokies were used, because they were shut down then, otherwise they'd still be working. And when they didn't know how to build anything, they could make it last for 100 years or more. And now with all our technology, we've got these roads that must be like 5 years or something like that. So if we can come back this way. Okay, up on this wall here, on the left-hand picture on the top there, that's an electric hydraulic jumbo, and that's what took the place of the jacklegs in later years. That thing was just under $1 million, and those jacklegs were only a few $1,000s, and they done the same work. And I can't remember how many of those jumbos they bought, and they had some two-boom ones that were around $1.5 million. Over on the top right-hand picture, that was up on the 4,400 level. And that building you can see in the far right-hand corner there, that was the hoist room for that number 1 shaft. So they built a new office and dry complex off to the left of that picture there. So in 1984 we moved up to there. And that portal in the background became our way underground. We had to ride on those cattle carriers to get underground. They were horrible, rough, nasty, smoky things to ride on. And when you first went to go down on one of them, there'd be a few guys standing at the back end and say, where are you going, to the bottom? Yeah. Well, you might as well get on first then. Why? Well, it's a little smoother riding up there, and not only that, or less of smoke, so you'd say to them, well, why don't you get on up this one? Well, we've got to get off about halfway down, so it's better for us to be on the back. So you get on the front there with the float, there'd be about 5 guys, maybe 6 guys get on beside you, and you went down the ramp like this, but you sat sideways on the bench there. And as you're going down, those 5 guys are still beside you and start sliding down towards you like this. And if you were my size when you got to the bottom, you'd be about your size when you got to the bottom. I said, when you left outside, you'd be about your size when you got to the bottom. And those guys that told you were getting off halfway down, they'd get off at the bottom too. So after that, you'd try and get somebody else to get on ahead of you because you didn't want to get any smaller. These 2 air compressors here, there's one here, they're all over on the far side. They were in a mine in Juneau, Alaska that flooded in 1913. And this outfit made a deal to buy them. They paid $24,000 a piece for them. And they were installed in here in 1923. And they ran up until just a few years before the mine shut down because that mechanized equipment, they didn't need as much compressed air in later years. So they're still in good shape. If you were going to take them out of here now, it would probably cost at least $24,000 for somebody standing here like this trying to figure out what bolts to take them off with.
Right.
So if we can come back this way.
This is an actual model of the mine when it was in use. For a person to get from the top to the very bottom of the mine would take more than an hour. These compressors are water-cooled, and unfortunately after the mine shut down, water was left in this compressor, and it cracked due to the ice buildup inside, and now is completely useless. These are the punch clocks used by the miners when they clocked into their shift and then clocked out at the end. This is an original water pipe used to bring fresh water up to the mine site for people to drink and for other uses. The roadway right beside the train is where the original Canadian Pacific Railway came into the mine site. I hope you enjoyed this tour.
You may now like